Welcome to an audiobook entitled Parish Management and Operations, The Buck Stops Here, narrated by Catholic author Michael Brenda. We hope you enjoy the segment and find it useful in your ministerial work.
Chapter 47. Will you take the road less traveled? The net effect of creating a PMO strategic plan prioritizing your work along the lines as explained above, which is to say to begin the process of killing and replacing your broken PMO culture, will in almost all cases bring you here. Temporary but predictable internal organizational turmoil, ultimately followed by institutionalized, enduring, and great success, if you know what you are doing and can execute. Why? As previously explained, most people do not enjoy change, especially when change is misconstrued in their mind as, you want me to work harder for the same pay? You want me to do things your way when my way has been working just fine for years? No thanks. I'm going to resist that. Go back to where you came from and have a nice day. You might not have these words spoken to your face, and then again you might. But regardless, this is what people will be thinking, and this thinking forms the foundation of an entrenched, broken culture. Therefore, you can expect turnover after your employees and volunteers have been given their job description in writing, have been trained to perform their duties in the manner you have described and in alignment with the correct culture, and subsequently decide they are unwilling or unable to do the job as it must be done. It is precisely at this point you have reached a crucial decision junction in your strategic planning and execution efforts that will determine whether you will succeed or fail in installing superior PMO. How so? The process described above is mandatory for creating superior PMO, but it is also extremely challenging to achieve. Not necessarily mentally challenging, but emotionally challenging for the person driving the process. It is grinding work from the perspective that it can be emotionally draining until completion, the polar opposite of fun. No rational person enjoys this fix the bad and the ugly initial phase of the administrator's job. Oh my, yes, every administrator wants highly effective and smooth-running PMO. But very few are willing to do what it takes to actually create the smooth-running, highly effective PMO they desire. They agree to be the chicken in ham and eggs, but no thanks, not the pig. They are not that committed to the process. Most folks will simply choose to muddle along with the employees, volunteers, processes, and level of mediocrity they inherit and call it a day. This temptation is especially true when you know you have to only endure broken PMO for an agreed-upon specific length of time before you are reassigned and this mess becomes somebody else's problem. As such, a certain type of why bother, the mountain we seek to climb is too high, it can't be done, apathy or fatalistic attitude seeps in. The tendency in such situations is to rationalize that it is easier to endure the short-term pain and then move on to your next assignment than it is to do what is required to fix the mess you have inherited. After all, you didn't create the problems you inherited, so why should it be your job to fix them? Well, in this regard, let me be direct. You do not need anything presented in this audiobook to simply inherit broken PMO and perpetuate the status quo as it was given to you. But if you desire to provide the superior PMO service and services your community members deserve and you were called by God to provide, you are listening to the right book. The key, besides knowing what you are doing, is in your ability to execute and work your way through the early tough months without giving up, without quitting once you start. Expect those who report to you will quit, but you don't quit once you start this process. If you think you are going to quit, do not even begin to start down this road. For additional moral support in this regard, Proverbs 13, verse 4, "The appetite of the sluggard craves, but has nothing, but the appetite of the diligent is amply satisfied." Or Proverbs chapter 10, "The slack hand impoverishes, but the busy hand brings riches. A son who gathers in summer is a credit, a son who slumbers during harvest a disgrace. A wise heart accepts commands, but a babbling fool will be overthrown. Whoever walks honestly walks securely, but one whose ways are crooked will fare badly. One who winks at a fault causes trouble, but one who frankly reproves promotes peace." Or Ecclesiastes chapter 9, "Whatever work you find to do, do it with all your might. For there is neither achievement, nor planning, nor science, nor wisdom in Sheol, where you are going." Or Luke chapter 9, Jesus said, "No one who sets a hand to the plow and looks to what was left behind is fit for the kingdom of God." What awaits you now are many tried and true methods and tools for you to use as the PMO administrator. The mechanical application of the tools, the science of PMO, is relatively easy. However, insofar as you are willing to allow a culture of mediocrity to exist where you work, you will have no need for these tools. Thus, everything starts with your initial, upfront, personal resolve and firm commitment, your choice to see your way through the initial turmoil phase, the toughest phase, where it seems there is pushback coming from everyone in every direction, and little to no apparent progress is being made as you implement your vision through executing your strategic plan. The question here and now becomes, do you believe? Will you persevere through this very tough early phase? Do you have the courage to terminate employees who will not adapt to the new culture? Or will you make the mistake of implementing your PMO changes and making improvements in a piecemeal manner, in euphemistic and patently nonsensical phases where the second phase never happens? Or will you, as you must, deliver to the patient all the medicine needed to cure what ails this sick person? In other words, will you kill the old culture and replace it with the correct culture in its entirety? Nobody more profoundly and clearly explains why to choose wisely here than better than Robert Frost. Robert Frost said, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Again, keep your status quo and do not go down the road described here unless you have already resolved in your mind this, the prayer of the PMO administrator. If I am not going to start what I am about to start, then I will not start. There is no turning back, and there is no quitting once I start this process. I will ride it out no matter if everyone quits. I will ride it out. No matter what lies and false rumors are spread about me, I will complete the mission of transforming the PMO I inherited from what it was to the superior operation it was intended to be. I will do this not for my sake, but for the sake of the souls we are all called to serve. Amen. Chapter 48, Execution Overview. What is execution and why is it important to PMO? How do you attain superior execution from those who report to you? The discussion on the nature of execution is akin to discussing how the sausage is made. It is a real-world, blunt, candid assessment of the importance of execution in achieving superior PMO. Those not previously or correctly familiar with this subject matter tend to incorrectly assume based on reading the straight talk that follows, that the methods of achieving superior execution run toward the uncharitable, toward the proverbial drill sergeant, mean-spirited, etc. This takeaway would be absolutely incorrect, and it is in fact the antithesis of achieving superior execution. No such harsh methods in PMO need ever to be employed to achieve superior execution. The bottom line is this: the tension you feel between balancing organizational competence and compassionate management is never properly resolved by allowing incompetence to remain in the name of compassion. That some people you may meet do not understand this critical point on execution does not make it any less true. So as you listen to what follows, read nothing into how you go about achieving superior execution at this point. Your focus while listening should initially be on understanding the purpose, importance, and place of superior execution in PMO. Of course, logically we must cover what is meant by execution before we can discuss the art of achieving superior execution from the employees and volunteers who report to us. But in an era of hyper-political correctness, so-called safe zones and trigger word warnings, etc., doing nothing and ignoring problems stemming from an imagined fear of being labeled as abusive, mean-spirited, etc., is an easy trap to fall into. Therefore, recognize when you read or listen below on the nature of execution, we are not yet making any comments about methodology, practice, etc., on how you achieve what you are hearing. Make no assumptions about approaches or methods. How we attempt to achieve, and attempt is the correct descriptor here because there are no absolute guarantees when dealing with human beings. How we actually attempt to achieve superior execution through our employees and volunteers is discussed below. But I can report to you this much now: developing personnel who can execute at a superior level is, number one, far more art than a science, far more intuitive in approach and variable per person than rule-bound, formulaic, and static, as any successful coach will tell you. Developing personnel requires a logical approach, but not a formulaic one-size-fits-all rigid methodology. We are not here to flatten or homogenize anyone's strengths as an administrator, employee, or volunteer, but rather we are here to lean on them. Life has too many moving parts for an inflexible approach to personnel management. People are too complicated to be managed in such a rigid manner. Rigidity in approach is counterproductive and ultimately will bury you because you will not be able to delegate. There will be no one to delegate to because no one will want to work with you. Our core job in this regard: highlight the strengths of all our personnel, including yourself, while helping each to eliminate their specific weaknesses. Thus, a PMO administrator must be flexible, and a precursor ingredient to flexibility is high intellect. You cannot correctly exercise flexibility with personnel without high intellect. And point number 2, fact. Developing personnel who can execute at a superior level is not always achievable in every employee or volunteer who reports to you, no matter what you do. Why this is so will be explained below, and what to do about it will be covered in the chapters on hiring and firing. The point here is to recognize that if you are of the opinion, not to mention temperament, that everyone can be trained to do their job, you may be right, eventually, given infinite time. And although you may have infinite patience, do you have the gift of infinite time? Neither do I. Chapter 49. The Nature of Execution. First, St. Paul to the Colossians, chapter 3. Whatever you do, do from the heart, as for the Lord and not for others, knowing that you will receive from the Lord the due payment of the inheritance. Be slaves of the Lord Christ. End quote. What is the nature of execution? Let's turn to the dictionary. Execution as a noun. First definition: the carrying out or putting into effect of a plan, order, or course of action. Example: he was fascinated by the entire operation and its execution. Fine, but what is missing from the above definition? Acknowledging the elephant in the room that accompanies any discussion on execution. That's what's missing. Quality, as in quality of our execution. We start by facing this reality. Question: what is the point of you and I and everybody else engaging in all this work if it ultimately ends with poor execution, poor delivery of PMO services? Answer: there is no point. Poor execution can be achieved without the presence of any administrator or additional knowledge. Whenever I have encountered organizational brokenness, execution has always been one of the most obvious elephants in the room. But execution is the topic many learners want to ignore, to sweep under the rug. Let's just learn a bunch of stuff and call it a day. Forget about talking about the elephant in the room issue, how well we actually execute the stuff we learn. Let's just relish in the life of a learner, be a seeker of truth, blah, blah, blah. No, that position is not going to fly here. We are going to address the elephant in the room that answers to the name of execution. So what about you? Where do you stand on execution? Have you thought about execution in the context of applying this material and functioning in the future as a PMO administrator? Perhaps you have, but let's discuss execution through the more specific lens of job expectations and job performance of those who will report to you. First, Proverbs chapter 14, verse 23. In all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. As the saying goes, your mileage may vary, so we must speak here in general terms, because there are always some exceptions, and who knows what the future holds. Nevertheless, the so-called millennial generation, Generation Y, and post-millennial generation, Generation Z, were raised by a generation of parents, either baby boomers or Generation X, who often enshrine a performance doctrine best summarized as, everyone gets a ribbon. First place, last place, whatever place, earned or not, little Johnny and little Susie have to get a ribbon because, after all, they tried, and merely trying, well, trying also deserves a reward. So let me be very clear now for anyone so inclined to this line of thought. The everybody gets a ribbon and company attitude has no resemblance whatsoever to execution in the real world, the world of performance-based job reviews, merit-based raises and promotion, delegation of work to competent personnel, making payroll, paying all the monthly bills, dealing with litigation, etc. After the requisite training has been provided, superior execution of any and all PMO jobs must be done 100% correctly the first time, not merely, I attempted to do my job correctly, therefore I did my job. The people we are called to serve should actually receive the superior service they deserve and nothing less. This isn't T-ball. In the real world, which includes employment by the church, everyone absolutely does not receive a ribbon for trying. Does the above sound too harsh to you? Let me further explain. Experience and execution is what you get when you didn't produce the expected results. Fine. But experience at the expense of others is not what we strive for. The parishioner deserves superior PMO service outright. They did not agree to be recruited as an educational tool in your on-the-job training of PMO personnel. Recognize that superior execution is not defined as just showing up for work, and ultimately it is also not defined as trying your best. All things being equal, meaning you must have been properly trained to perform the job at hand, the results you produce, or the lack thereof, are directly derived from your ability or willingness to execute. Can you execute is not only the paramount question asked at this junction by the PMO administrator. Monitoring the answer to this question on behalf of parishioners you are called to serve is the reason you come to work every day. Furthermore, and of paramount importance to your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, blessedly note here that I did not say you come to work so that you can do everyone else's job for them. Of course, everyone has a bad day, but the PMO administrator is not designated by intrinsic organizational design to be the go-to person to cover for the systemic incompetence of employees or volunteers who report to them. If you allow this condition to exist, you will cheat the organization you are charged to manage while simultaneously burning yourself out. You will gradually become ineffective wearing any and every hat on your PMO administrator hat rack, exhausted at the end of the day, but having accomplished very little.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.